Accessing peace. Existing without violence, with the ability to calmly resolve conflict. Downloading love. An overwhelming, deep, positive affection towards others. Activating liberty. Living your life as you see fit without infringing on the lives of others.
Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at FPPRadio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism. Back with the weekly show. Yeah. I know. It started off weekly. It's sort of come mostly a full circle. So when the show began almost 6 years ago, I know, hard to believe, right? But when the show began, again, almost 6 years ago, it was a weekly show. It at the time was live on the Liberty Radio Network on Sundays, and it was 2 hours live, but the archive, after removing commercials, wound up being just over 1 hour, and then wound up changing that a couple of years ago and doing a several time a week show. There were then plans at the time when I started doing multiple times per week. There were plans, if certain things happened, to go 5 days per week. Those things never happened. And then, as they say, life happened, and it went from 3 days per week down to 2. And then I just decided to wind up giving myself a little bit more me time, if you will, going down to once per week. So it's still keeping the show going, but just dropping it back down to weekly 30-minute show. I might expand at some point to an hour. No plans necessarily to do that. But, I do like keeping to a show clock, where I know a lot of podcasts, they're just sort of, free form, and they'll talk until they're done talking. But that's not really, how I like to do things as a, radio guy. I like knowing here's when the break is, here's when the end of the show is, and if there's more to say, well, sorry, I didn't get to it. But again, still doing the Ask Me Anything, but of course that's not going to be the entire focus of the show, unless I just happen to have a bunch of questions, and then it will be. So, speaking of questions, I do have a couple of them. The first came in as a response to the Ask Me Anything thread that was posted on Facebook. Yes, I know, I post Ask Me Anything threads on the Facebook and the Twitter. There have been a couple of weeks when I've forgotten to do that, but I generally try to get those posted up on Monday or Tuesday, and it's just an infographic that says, every Friday I answer your questions. Respond to this thread or send an email to using the website ama.fppradio.com. Now, you could send an email to ama@fppradio.com, but that contact form on there at ama.fppradio.com, it allows you to send the questions anonymously if you want the question to be anonymous. So the question that came in on the Facebook, and I'm going to have to be a little delicate here, no pun intended right there. The question was, why are boobs so fun? And believe it or not, that question came in from a female listener. Now, I'm going to try to be very scientific here. Not that I fancy myself a scientist, but I did find an article from Live Science about a theory on why men love breast. The mammary glands, which are a defining feature of mammals, it's what causes the breast to develop on women, and occasionally there are some men that will develop fat tissue in that area, but we're talking about female breast here. Mammary glands are a defining feature of mammals, but humans seem unique in granting mammaries a sexual role. That's not to say that interest in nipples is entirely unheard of elsewhere in the animal kingdom. And then they cite a book written by Canadian biologist Bruce Begmill, who notes that a couple of primate species, including humans' closest relatives, the bonobo, have been seen stimulating their own nipples while pleasuring themselves. Still, few mammals other than humans mate face-to-face. The behavior makes headlines when seen in the wild, so nipple stimulation is not generally part of the script. Again, outside of humans. Researchers have long speculated that humans evolved the fatty deposits around the female mammary glands for sexual reasons. Anthropologist Owen Lovejoy argues the evolution puts a bullseye around both female and male reproductive organs in order to promote pair bonding. In his hypothesis, it wasn't just the female breast that got a lift. Men acquired relatively large penises for their body as well. Another long-standing theory holds that breast evolved as a way to signal to men that women attached to them the woman attached to them was nutritionally advantaged and youthful, and thus a promising mate. Studies finding that men prefer large breast and a high waist-to-hip ratio bolster the notion that an hourglass shape communicates youth and fertility. A 2004 study in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B even found that women with large breasts have higher levels of the hormone estradiol mid-cycle, which could increase fertility. They then go in to talk about whether it is nature or nurture, meaning that maybe humans are just basically taught to sexualize the female breast, and it could be, especially in the United States, where in some places women are not allowed to walk around without a top. And that, what do they say? Well, those are the erotic zones. You're not allowed to see those. And if you do, then that's naughty. So in some ways, the breasts are made to be sexual just because society deems them to be. Stay tuned. There's more, and I will post the link to this live science article in the show notes. You can read the full thing at your leisure. Stay tuned. There's more here on Peace Love Radio, online at fppradio.com.
In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? Will anybody care? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Changing gears, and I'll get into the next question in just a moment. But first, I've got a question for you. Do you use Bitcoin? Do you support free market money? Do you like using alternatives to the U.S. dollar? If so, then you need Spend-A-Bit in your arsenal, or at least in your bookmarks. Spend-A-Bit is the search engine for things you can buy with Bitcoin. Spend-A-Bit aggregates millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants. Keep your money in the free economy. Spend a bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com. And if you're a Bitcoin accepting merchant like I am, ask about their merchant services to reach even more customers. That's spendabit.fppradio.com. Spendabit.fppradio.com. And I'm taking a look, and they still have well over 3 million products in their search engine. Spendabit.fppradio.com. So the next question, and Jay Noon, I remembered. Yeah. So I was talking with Jay a couple of nights ago, and he asked me, hey, can you talk about this thing on your show? And I said, shoot me an email so I don't forget, because I've got an absolutely horrible memory at times. And he said, so do I. I'll probably forget to send you an email. And sure enough, he forgot to send me an email, but I did not forget that he wanted me to talk about a trip that I took. So, let me preface this by saying that, well, I don't really know how to preface this, other than, yeah, I really don't know how to preface this. Well, you know what? I will say that if you have children in the area and you do not want them to hear about possible drug use, turn off the thing or skip ahead until the 17-minute mark. And I will begin the story. I'm going to count down. You have been warned. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, if you don't want to hear this story, skip ahead to the 17-minute mark. So the question is, Darryl, tell me about the trip that you had at my wedding. And again, this from Jay Noon, friend of the show. If you're a listener of Free Talk Live, he's an occasional caller. He's been a co-host on the show. And he got married during ForkFest. ForkFest was a camping festival that happened in the White Mountains of New Hampshire back just a few days prior to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, PorkFest. So ForkFest, ForkFest. Plans are already underway for next year. You can find out at forkfest.party. So, Jay Noon, again, got married at ForkFest, and I decided that after his wedding, it would be a nice time to have a little trip and take some psilocybin. Was my first time intentionally dosing on psilocybin. I may or may not have ever talked about trying to microdose, because I've heard that microdosing, and there have been several studies showing that microdosing of psilocybin is good for treating chronic headaches. And if you've listened to the show, you know that I deal with chronic headaches from way too many concussions. So I decided to intentionally dose. I say intentionally because while trying to microdose, I didn't necessarily wind up getting the dose correct, and I kind of started to trip one time but didn't really do so. So the intentional trip, if you've ever been to Rogers Campground, then you're familiar with the layout here. So there's what they refer to as the fishbowl area, where it's just a big field and it's surrounded by a hill. There's a rock. So I sat in the shadow of the rock after having taken the dose. And I'm sitting there. Actually, I was kind of laying and looking up at the clouds. And I sort of really focused on the clouds. And then I could see the rainbows that made up the clouds. And then the sky turned into a kaleidoscope. And it was really nice. I knew that, the sky wasn't actually a kaleidoscope, but if I focused my eyes on something, then it would kind of, kaleidoscope. And then if I blinked, then it would go back to being normal. And then I decided to watch the people down in the little fishbowl area. And in my mind, I was consciously aware that his wedding reception was going on. But in my mind, for some reason, I was watching a documentary. And I couldn't really understand everything that was going on, but there were parts where there was a little narrator in my head explaining things that I was seeing. And I later figured out that what I was watching in the movie, it was a documentary about the human mating rituals. And I was not able to actually figure them out. And there was, on the mountain, there was something that appeared to be a CAPTCHA. And I know it wasn't actually a CAPTCHA, but you know how like sometimes there's just shapes and stuff, and you're like, I see this. And you know, your subconscious sees shapes. So my subconscious, the shapes looked like letters, like on a website where it says, enter this to prove you're not a robot. And I just couldn't solve the CAPTCHA to prove that I was not a robot or something. So I was never able to actually unlock the secrets of the human mating rituals. And then there was also a bounce house, and everybody that I tell this to says, are you sure there was a bounce house? Yes, there was actually a bounce house. And because I'm a big wrestling fan, as I was watching the kids bounce in the bounce house, what I was seeing was a wrestling match, but I couldn't figure out the rules of their match, and I couldn't figure out why nobody just climbed outside of the thing that appeared to be a cage. And nobody ever won the wrestling match. But yeah, it was just a very interesting experience, and one that I would probably have again. Again, it's not something that, you know, everybody needs to do all the time, and it's been, over a month? I've only done it the once. You need to be in the right state of mind when you do it, and you need to make sure that you're in a place where you feel comfortable. Stay tuned. There's more. Here on Peace Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to ZOG.Ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, ZOG.Ninja, code FPP.
Hey, this is Scott from the ANCAP Barbershop, and you're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, and thank you for rejoining if you skipped ahead to not hear the delightful little story that I just told. Now, I'll change gears here and talk about milk. I know, strange, right? But I just happen to have seen this headline, and while I don't necessarily talk about news of the day on this show anymore, this headline was just way too much, and it sort of relates to health, nutrition, and the other things that I do like discussing on this show. But before I do, I want to tell you about something else that I really like, and that would be Zencash. Zencash is an end-to-end encrypted system with zero-knowledge technology over which communications, data, or value can be securely transmitted and stored. With over 13,000 secure nodes, Zencash has one of the most distributed secure node systems of any cryptocurrency. And Zencash just rolled out supernodes. No, that's not a node that has a cape. It's just a node that has more Zen staked into the node. So a secure node has 42 Zen staked to it. A super node has 500. And again, those just rolled out a couple of days ago. Zencash is also a platform for cryptocurrency and communications built by voluntarists for voluntarists, with the ideas of voluntary interaction being written into the white paper no less than half a dozen times. And the Zencash wallet is available for Linux, Mac, Windows, and Android devices. Learn more at zencash.com. That's zencash.com. So, changing gears here, talking about milk. Specifically, why is the FDA cracking down on alternative milk? What is alternative milk, you might be asking? Well, you've probably heard of soy milk, almond milk, coconut milk. Yeah, those are all alternative milks, and the FDA, they announced recently that they're going to possibly crack down on non-dairy products labeled milk. FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb earlier this week told the Politico Pro Summit, quote, "An almond doesn't lactate." You don't say. Really? Really? Really, Scott? I could have sworn that I saw little nipples on almonds. Of course almonds don't lactate. But he continued, quote, or rather, not yet a quote, his comments, according to Newsweek, were in reference to the FDA's current milk standard, which states, quote, "Milk is the lacteal secretion, practically free from colostrum, obtained by the complete milking of one or more healthy cows," end quote. The FDA soon will begin gathering public comment on the issue before acting to redefine milk products. Gottlieb said this is going to take some time. It's not going to take 2 years, but it probably takes something closer to a year to go through the process. The FDA declined to comment further on the issue. Now the article here from Newsweek continues. Gottlieb's comments come as the dairy and meat industries attempt to deal with consumers shunning traditional products for animal-free alternatives. According to trends forecaster Mintel, sales of milk in the United States were expected to drop by 11% between 2015 and 2020. In the past 5 years, non-dairy milk alternatives, such as soy milk and almond milk, have grown in popularity, with sales spiking by more than 61%. Such products are often staples of plant-based vegan and vegetarian diets. This isn't the first time Gottlieb has addressed the concerns of the dairy industry. In April, he said the FDA was actively investigating whether non-dairy milk manufacturers were misleading consumers by using the terms milk and yogurt. Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, the U.S. state with the second biggest milk production after California, introduced the Dairy Pride Act on behalf of the industry in 2017. The bill, which did not pass, but if it would have, would restrict the term milk to the lacteal secretions of cows alone. Spokesperson for the Grocery Manufacturers Association, which represents the branded food, beverage, and consumer product industries, told Newsweek, "We look forward to reviewing the FDA guidance once it's issued." Now, there's more from this article from Newsweek, but let me jump over to an article from Grub Street. Jumping down after they basically repeat some of what he's already said that Newsweek referenced. While Gottlieb's comments may have sounded like an improv bit, hey, what's the deal with oat milk? It's likely that a guidance document that outlines proposed FDA regulatory changes is in the pipeline. Possible new rules about what products are allowed to call themselves milk may be here by the end of 2019, in part because of lawmakers and lobbyists' long-running and, at times, chaotic effort to decimate the non-dairy industry. There's no better time for the government to push rules that would force manufacturers to take the word milk off cartons and Tetra packs of cashew, almond, soy, rice, quinoa, macadamia, and more. Even oat milk, a relative newcomer to the alt milk scene that was celebrated in perhaps the most disturbing New York Times graphic ever, would in theory have to rebrand. And then they link over to that New York Times graphic that appears to show someone milking an oat. Yes, they're actually milking an oat. Stay tuned. There is more here in the closing moments of Peace Love Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
This November, I'll be running the world's biggest and most popular marathon, the New York City Marathon, as a member of Team Innocence Project. The Innocence Project was the first legal organization to systematically apply DNA testing to cases of wrongful convictions as a powerful tool to reveal innocence. Tony Wright is a perfect example of the power of DNA. The Innocence Project litigated for almost 6 years to get the court's permission for DNA testing. Tony had been incarcerated for nearly 25 years in Pennsylvania and narrowly escaped the death penalty. Tony's case, sadly, is not unique. Empowered with the unequivocal proof of innocence provided by DNA technology, the Innocence Project has litigated hundreds of wrongful conviction cases, leading to the exoneration and freedom for more than 180 people through DNA testing. Overall, there have been 356 DNA exonerees in the United States who were wrongfully imprisoned for more than 4,875 years in total. You can help support the Innocence Project and help me secure my race entry in the New York City Marathon by going to run.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Talking about alternatives to milk, and the FDA wanting to crack down on who's allowed to use the word milk. Bruce Frederick, co-founder and executive director of the Good Food Institute, said our advice to the milk industry is to be careful what you wish for. What they want is a nanny state, which people generally oppose. It would favor censorship, which people also dislike, and it would go against fair competition and markets, which are things most people support. Plus, they'll lose in the end. We have the most pro-free speech Supreme Court in history. For such a bland food, milk is proving to be a surprising source of reflux in 2018. The slow decline of America's milk consumption has caused a crisis. Well, it's only a crisis for the people who rely on others buying milk, right? A per-person average of 30 gallons per year in the 1970s has become just 18 gallons per year today. Cow's milk is an increasingly harder item to sell in a marketplace of alternatives. Other animals are also involved. There's even a burgeoning camel milk fad and an enterprising South African company selling milk from Hermetia illucens, a wasp-like insect. Some people refer to alternative milks as counterfeits, with the cow part of counterfeit spelled C-O-W. Now, they do get down later in this article, and there's not time to get into it too deeply, but they talk about things like peanut butter and almond butter that have never had problems with the FDA for being labeled butter. Nobody thinks that peanut butter is a dairy product. They also mentioned rice noodles. Nobody thinks that rice noodles are the same thing as some other form of noodle, right? So why is it that now the dairy industry is getting special protection? And my guess is it goes back to that decline of milk consumption. And I'm wondering if, like part of this thing is maybe some schools are getting away from requiring children to drink milk at lunch. I remember when I was in school, until I was in high school, that was the drink that you got. You had milk or you had nothing. So, yeah, maybe. And it definitely, screams some form of cronyism. But the article here concludes the First Amendment challenge is very likely if the ruling doesn't go in favor of milk alternatives. And I, for one, don't like cow's milk, but I do like almond milk, and I'll keep drinking it. This has been Peace Love Liberty Radio. I'll be back next Friday answering your questions. Send those over AMA.FPPRadio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copy Heart. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News, and also get a copy of the monthly newspaper FPP News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.